I am Henry Crawford. I'm 70 years old. When I ran breathless into the intensive care unit, a nurse I'd never seen before grabbed my arm. Her grip was like steel. "Mr. Crawford," she asked, her eyes urgent. Before I could answer, she pulled me out of the hallway and into a dark, cold storage room. "Don't go in there. Not yet," she whispered, shutting the door until only a thin crack of light remained. "Shh. Trust me and watch." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked through the crack in the door. I saw my son-in-law, David, standing over my daughter, Emily's bed. My Emily, who was supposed to be unconscious, fighting for her life. And then, I saw my daughter sit bolt upright and reach for a bottle of water. "Do you think he bought it?" she asked, her voice perfectly clear. David just smirked. "He'll buy whatever we tell him to." My world ended right there. I collapsed onto the cold, sterile floor. It had all started just an hour earlier. 2:07 a.m. The phone on my nightstand shrieked, tearing me from a fitful sleep. You know, at my age, a call at 2 in the morning is never good news. It's never a wrong number. It's always a harbinger of loss. My heart seized just as it did 2 years ago when the hospital called about my wife, Sarah. I fumbled for the receiver, my hands shaking. "Hello, Dad." It was David, my son-in-law. His voice was a wreck, cracking with panic and choked sobs. "Dad, you have to get to St. Jude's, right now." "David, what's wrong? What's happened?" "It's Emily. Oh God, Dad, it's Emily." He howled, and the sound chilled me to the bone. She was in an accident. A car accident on the highway. She was driving home late from her office. "How bad is she?" I demanded, already throwing off the covers, my feet hitting the cold floor. "It's bad, Dad. It's really bad. She's in the ICU. They said she's unconscious. They don't know if she'll... Just please get here fast." The line clicked dead. I stood there paralyzed, the phone buzzing uselessly in my hand. Not Emily. Not my only girl. I don't remember putting on my shoes or grabbing my keys. The next thing I knew, I was wrestling my old Volvo out of the driveway of my modest suburban home. This house, the one Sarah and I bought 40 years ago, suddenly felt like a tomb. Since Sarah passed from that damned cancer, David and Emily have been my rock. Or rather, David has. Emily was devastated by her mother's death, locking herself away emotionally. But David stepped up. He became the son I never had. He'd come over every week to my small, quiet house. "Dad, let me handle these," he'd say, gently taking the stack of utility bills and medical statements from my desk. "You're 70. You shouldn't be worrying about complex insurance paperwork. You just rest." I was so grateful. My pension wasn't huge, just what a lifelong structural engineer saves up, and the paperwork was confusing. David, a successful financial manager, handled it all. He'd balance my checkbook, make sure my mortgage, which I'd almost paid off, was current, and always reminded me to take my heart medication. "You've got to take care of yourself, Dad," he'd say, his hand on my shoulder. "You're all Emily has left." My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The Volvo's engine strained. All Emily has left. And now she was fighting for her life. The thought of losing her too. It was unthinkable. The fluorescent lights of the St. Jude emergency room were blinding. I smelled that familiar awful smell, bleach and fear. "ICU. My daughter, Emily Vance, she was just brought in." The young woman at the desk looked flustered. "Third floor, sir. Take the elevators to the left. ICU." I didn't wait for the elevator. I found the stairs and took them 2 at a time, my lungs burning, my 70-year-old knees screaming in protest. I didn't care. I burst through the double doors of the ICU, my eyes scanning the rooms, looking for her, for David. "Mr. Crawford." I turned. A nurse older than the others was standing right behind me. Her name tag read Grace. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and sad. "Yes, that's me." My daughter Emily. She put a hand on my chest, stopping me. Don't go in there, she said, her voice low and firm. What do you mean I have to see her? I tried to push past, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Not yet, she insisted. Please, come with me. I'm not going anywhere until I see my daughter. Mr. Crawford. She looked me dead in the eyes. If you love your daughter, if you loved your wife, you will come with me right now. The mention of Sarah stopped me cold. How did she? She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed my elbow and steered me into a dark, cold supply room. It smelled of iodine and old linens. What is this like? I demanded, my panic turning to confusion. Shh, she commanded, pressing a finger to her lips. She shut the door, leaving it open just a tiny, imperceptible crack. I am breaking every rule in the book right now, but I made a promise to your wife. A promise? Trust me, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. And watch. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it in the hallway. I pressed my eye to the crack in the door. I could see room 3. I saw the machines. I saw David, his back to us, talking to Dr. Anderson. And I saw Emily, my daughter, lying still, wires and tubes everywhere. My breath hitched. She looked so small. He's here, David said to the doctor. The nurse at the desk just paged me. He's on his way up. Good, Dr. Anderson replied, making a note on a chart. We'll let him see her for a minute, let him break down. Then you step in with the paperwork. Given his advanced age and history of, let's call it, emotional distress, since his wife's passing, no judge will question a temporary power of attorney. He won't suspect a thing, David said. And then I watched frozen in that dark closet as my daughter, my comatose, critically injured daughter, sat bolt upright in the bed. She reached over and grabbed a bottle of water from the bedside table and took a long drink. Do you think he bought it? Emily asked. Her voice was perfectly clear, sharp, and cold. I stopped breathing. David smirked, turning to face her. He'll buy whatever we tell him to, sweetheart. He's a sentimental old fool. He's been half senile since Mom died anyway. Good, Emily said, lying back down and pulling the oxygen mask back over her face. Just get it done. Get him to sign. I'm sick of waiting for what's ours. Dr. Anderson nodded. I'll go prep the nurse's station. He left the room. David leaned down and kissed Emily on the forehead. It's almost over, he whispered to his unconscious wife. I didn't feel the floor rush up to meet me. I didn't feel my head hit the linoleum. The last thing I heard before the darkness took over was Aita Grace's sharp intake of breath. My world, the one I had known for 70 years, had just ended. The cold of the linoleum floor seeped through my shirt, bringing me back. I smelled ammonia, sharp and stinging. Mr. Crawford. Henry, can you hear me? I blinked. Nurse Grace was kneeling beside me, waving a small white packet under my nose. My head throbbed. The image of Emily, my daughter, sitting up in that ICU bed, her voice cold. David's smirk. It all rushed back. It wasn't a nightmare. It's real, I whispered, my voice hoarse. I'm so sorry, Grace said, helping me sit up. My back protested as I leaned against a metal shelf. I'm so sorry you had to see it that way, but I had to show you the truth. I looked at this stranger, this woman who had just detonated my entire life. Why me? Why do you care? Her eyes, weary from years of night shifts and watching people die, softened with a profound sadness. Because I made a promise, she said quietly. I was your wife's nurse, Henry. I was with Sarah during her final days here. A memory flashed, this same woman, Grace, adjusting Sarah's pillow, holding her hand when I was too choked with grief to speak. She knew. Grace continued, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't trust David. Not for a second. She saw the way he looked at you. The way he talked about your finances when he thought she was asleep. Grace recounted Sarah's last coherent words to her. It was a rainy night just 2 days before the end. I had gone home for a few hours exhausted. Sarah had gripped Grace's hand. Please, Sarah had whispered, her voice like dry leaves. Watch over Henry for me. He's too trusting. His heart is too open. Emily is a good girl, but David is after something. I can feel it. He's a hunter. Please, promise me. Watch Henry. I promised her I would, Grace said to me, her eyes filling with tears. And I have. I've been watching David and Emily. I saw them meeting with Dr. Anderson in the cafeteria last week, laughing. Anderson owes David a fortune in gambling debts. This fake accident. This was their way of paying it off. I sat there on the cold floor, the grief for my daughter's betrayal warring with the enduring love for my wife's foresight. The pain didn't lessen, but it crystallized. The fog of my sorrow cleared, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. So, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, they're doing all this for what? Grace looked at me confused. For your house, I suppose. Your pension. That's all they ever talked about. Your modest savings. I looked at my hands, the hands of a retired engineer stained with grease from my old Volvo. They think I'm poor, I said. It wasn't a question. They're trying to rob a cabin, I muttered, while standing on top of a gold mine. Grace frowned. What are you talking about? I met her gaze. The time for secrets was over. Nurse Grace, my name is Henry Crawford, but I'm not just a retired engineer. 40 years ago, I invented and patented H-composite, the material they use in everything. Grace finished, her eyes widening in disbelief. Satellites, skyscrapers. My God, Mr. Crawford. You're that Henry Crawford. I am, I said. My wife and I set up a trust in Geneva. My daughter thinks I have about $1.5 million. The truth is, that's just the interest I pay myself every year. Grace was speechless. My net worth, I said, the words tasting like ash, is 9 figures, and my daughter and son-in-law are trying to have me declared senile for a 3-bedroom house. Just as the enormity of it settled between us, the door to the ICU hissed open. We heard Dr. Anderson's impatient voice. Nurse Grace, where are you? Has Mr. Crawford arrived yet? We need to get those papers signed. The patient's condition is volatile. I looked at Grace, she looked at me. She nodded once, a silent promise. It was time to perform. Grace looked at me, her eyes filled with a pained pity that I suddenly found intolerable. What are they doing, Mr. Crawford? She asked, her voice hushed. Are they really trying to take control of your house? Your pension? Just for that? I looked down at my own hands, calloused from years of working in my garage, not as an engineer, but on my old Volvo. I looked at my worn corduroy pants and my simple flannel shirt, the uniform of a harmless, retired old man. The fog of grief that had clouded my mind for 2 years, the shock from what I'd just seen, it all evaporated. It was replaced by something cold, hard, and sharp. They think so, I said. My voice was different, clearer. Nurse Grace, do you know who I am? She frowned. You're Henry Crawford. You were a structural engineer. I wasn't just an engineer, I said. 30 years ago, when I was working in aerospace, I invented a material, a carbon matrix composite. They call it H-composite. Grace's eyes widened. She was old enough to know the name. H-composite, the material they use in everything: satellites, modern construction, and military drones and high-speed rail and surgical implants, I added. I hold the foundational patents. My wife Sarah was brilliant. She wasn't just a partner. She was a strategist. She insisted we license the technology, not sell it. She insisted we set up a private holding company. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. My company, Crawford Sterling Holdings, is based in Geneva, Switzerland. It manages a trust fund that, well, let's just say my daughter thinks my entire net worth, including the house, is about $1.5 million. That's the number I let David discover when he started managing my finances. My God, Grace whispered. So the truth, I said, is that my pension is an allowance I pay myself. The $1.5 million is the interest I earn in a bad quarter. My fund is 9 figures, Nurse Grace. And I've spent the last 30 years pretending to be average because Sarah and I wanted our daughter to have a normal life. We wanted her to value work, not wealth. We saw what money did to other families, and we hid ours to protect her. Grace was completely stunned. Her mind was visibly racing, connecting the dots. So, she stammered. I finally looked back toward the ICU room where my daughter was lying in wait, where my son-in-law was preparing to steal my meager assets. They are trying to steal a log cabin, I said, the cold rage settling deep in my bones, while standing on top of a gold mine they don't even know exists. The silence of the supply closet was absolute. Then the hiss of the ICU door opening shattered it. We heard David's voice, smooth and confident, outside the closet. Dr. Anderson, I appreciate you expediting this. Of course, Dr. Anderson's voice replied. It's the least we can do, Nurse Grace. He called out, his tone impatient. Has Mr. Crawford arrived yet? We need him to sign these consent and POA forms immediately. The patient's condition is volatile. Grace gave me one last, steadying look. It's time, she whispered. I nodded. I am Henry Crawford, but the man who was about to walk out of this closet was not. The man walking out was the one they had invented, the one they were counting on, the sentimental old fool. I summoned the genuine grief I still felt for Sarah, the raw, aching loss, and I channeled it toward the lie waiting for me in that hospital bed. Grace opened the door. I didn't just walk out. I staggered, collapsing against the doorframe, my hand clutching my chest. The bright fluorescent lights of the ICU hallway blurred in my vision. David, I shouted. My voice cracked and broke. It wasn't hard to fake. David, my daughter, my Emily. David spun around from the nurse's station. His face was a masterpiece of controlled panic. He had been smirking with Dr. Anderson seconds before, but now his eyes were wide, his mouth agape. He rushed toward me, catching me just as I let my knees buckle. Dad. Oh God. Dad, you're here. He wrapped his arms around me in that hollow, performative hug. I could smell the expensive cologne on his $1,000 suit, a suit I had probably paid for through the allowance I gave Emily. I buried my face in his shoulder, letting my body tremble, playing the part of the 70-year-old man, shattered, senile, and broken by grief. Is she... I couldn't finish the sentence. I just sobbed. She's holding on, Dad, he whispered, his voice catching appropriately. But it's bad. It's really bad. She hit her head. There's swelling. He held me at arm's length, his eyes scanning my face, not with love, but with assessment. He was looking for the confusion he and Emily had spent the last 6 months cultivating. You look terrible, Dad. Your hands are shaking. Are you okay? You shouldn't be alone right now. I can't think. I stammered, looking past him toward room 3 where my daughter, the monster, lay pretending to be near death. Dr. Anderson approached us, a digital tablet in hand. He had the perfect bedside manner, grave, professional, and slightly rushed. Mr. Crawford, I am Dr. Anderson, the head of neurosurgery. Is she? I whispered, playing my part. Your daughter has severe intracranial pressure, Mr. Crawford. A significant bleed. We need to perform an emergency decompressive craniotomy. He used the long, terrifying words deliberately. A cranny? Oh God, her head. I stumbled back, and David dutifully steadied me. We need your signature on these consent forms immediately. Anderson said, his voice clipped. He looked at David, a shared quick glance, and then back at me. However, I have some concerns. Mr. Vance mentioned you have a pre-existing heart condition, and Nurse Grace at the front desk reported that you fainted in the hallway when you arrived. My eyes widened. I turned to look at Grace, who had quietly moved to the nurse's station, her face a perfect mask of neutrality. I fainted, I stammered. I don't remember. It's all too much. David stepped in, placing a strong, supportive hand on my shoulder. Doctor, he's not well. He's been this way ever since my mother-in-law Sarah passed. He's confused. David looked at me with such pity, such false, deep, agonizing pity it made my blood boil. He forgets things, Doctor, all the time. I forget things. I looked at David, trying to inject the perfect amount of wounded confusion into my voice. David, what are you saying? Dad, yes. David said, his voice dripping with the kind of sympathy you'd use on a child. Remember last week, you couldn't find your car keys for 2 hours. You were convinced someone stole them. He had hidden them in the freezer. Or when you missed your cardiology appointment, you swore it was next Tuesday. He had changed it in my calendar. I thought, this is a complex medical situation, Mr. Crawford, Anderson interjected smoothly. The decisions involved are high risk. Are you sure you're in a stable emotional state to provide informed consent right now? I looked at the floor, shaking my head. I don't know. I can't think straight. My baby girl. David immediately produced a different set of papers from his briefcase. A thick, ominous stack. Doctor, this is why I prepared these, just in case of an emergency like this. He handed them not to Anderson, but to me. Dad, this is a temporary power of attorney, medical and financial. It just lets me sign the papers for Emily's surgery. It lets me handle the insurance, the billing, so you don't have to bear this burden. You can go home. You can rest. I'll handle everything. I stared at the papers. The trap was sprung. They were so arrogant, so confident in my weakness, that they had handed me the very weapon of their own destruction. You prepared these, I whispered, looking at him with dawning horror. Just to protect you, Dad, he said soothingly. Just to protect the family. I know this is what Sarah would have wanted. The mention of her name was the final mistake. I took the pen from his hand. My own hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was from rage. I looked at the signature line. David and Anderson leaned in, their eyes fixed on the pen. David held the thick stack of documents from his briefcase. He fanned them out on the nurse's counter with a sad, practiced sigh, as if this whole situation was a terrible burden on him. Dad, this is just a temporary power of attorney, he said, his voice soft and soothing. Medical and financial. It just means I can sign the consent for Emily's surgery. It means I can handle the insurance calls, the billing, so you don't have to bear this. You can go home. You can rest. I'll handle everything. He tapped the signature line at the bottom of the first page. I know you're not used to this complex legal stuff, Dad. He continued, his tone dripping with fake pity. It's all so confusing. Just let me take this one thing off your plate. It was the same line he'd used for months. The same condescending phrase, always wrapped in a blanket of false concern. He thought he was talking to a child. He thought he was talking to a fool. I took the pen from his hand. I made sure my own hand was trembling. It wasn't hard to fake. The rage rising in my throat was making my whole body shake. You're a good son, David, I whispered, my voice cracking. Thank you. I just can't think. My head is foggy. I looked at the signature line. I could feel their eyes on me. David. Anderson. Even Grace watching from the nurse's station. David was practically vibrating with anticipation. Dr. Anderson had a small, triumphant smirk that he quickly tried to hide. They were so close. They could taste the money. The tip of my pen hovered just a millimeter above the paper. I started to make the first slow, shaky stroke of the H in Henry. I would advise against signing that, Mr. Crawford. The voice was sharp, cold, and echoed with absolute authority. It cut through the tense, sterile air of the ICU hallway like a surgeon's scalpel. David and Anderson froze. Their smiles vanished. 3 people were walking toward us. 2 large men in dark, impeccably tailored suits and a woman in the lead. She was tall, with platinum blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than my Volvo, and her eyes, the color of a winter sky, were fixed on David and the doctor. They didn't just walk. They advanced. "Can we help you?" Dr. Anderson stammered, his professional mask slipping, revealing the gambler underneath. The woman stopped directly in front of them. She didn't even glance at me. "Dr. Alistair Anderson, Mr. David Vance?" "Yes." David said, his voice suddenly uncertain. He cleared his throat. "Who are you?" The woman held up a badge in a leather wallet. "My name is Foster. I am an investigator with the State Medical Board. My colleagues are from the Securities and Exchange Commission." SEC. The color drained from David's face. He looked like he'd been punched. Dr. Anderson looked like he was about to be sick right on the polished floor. "We have received," Foster continued, her voice devoid of all emotion, "a credible, verified tip regarding an active conspiracy to commit medical fraud, insurance fraud, and financial malfeasance. We are here to secure all records related to patient Emily Vance and to speak with both of you immediately." David and Anderson were completely blindsided. They looked like statues. David turned to me, his eyes wide with a confusion so real it was almost comical. He was still trying to play the part. "Dad, what is this? Is this about your pension? It must be some kind of mistake. This is an outrageous interruption," Dr. Anderson blustered, trying to regain his authority. "I am in the middle of a medical emergency. My patient—" "Your patient," Foster interrupted, "seems to be quite stable according to the nurse who has actually been monitoring her." Everyone turned to Nurse Grace. She had stepped away from the nurse's station and was standing there, her arms crossed, a small, grim smile on her face. She looked at me, ignoring everyone else in the hallway. "Mr. Crawford," Grace said, her voice clear and strong. "I'm so glad she could make it on such short notice. You really should meet your lawyer." David's head snapped back to me, his jaw dropping. "Your lawyer?" I let the pen drop from my fingers. It clattered loudly on the countertop, the sound echoing in the sudden, terrible silence. I stood up straight, my back no longer bent by feigned grief. I met my son-in-law's gaze. Ba Foster turned to David, a flicker of a smile on her own lips. "Mr. Vance," she said, "I am not just from the SEC. I am the lead counsel for Crawford Sterling Holdings in Geneva, and I am Mr. Crawford's lawyer." David's jaw literally dropped. His eyes darted between me, the old man in the flannel shirt he thought he knew, and this terrifying woman in the black suit. "Your lawyer," he stammered the word, catching in his throat. Ms. Foster stepped forward. She didn't just move. She occupied the space, placing herself between me and David, a human shield made of expensive wool and steel. "I am Ms. Foster," she stated, her voice cutting through the sterile air, each word precise. "I am the lead counsel for Crawford Sterling Holdings based in Geneva, Switzerland." She paused, letting the location sink in. "I serve as the primary legal representative for Mr. Henry Crawford and his 9-figure trust." 9 figures. I had said the words to Grace, but hearing Foster say them out loud in front of these predators, it felt like a judgment. David turned pale. He actually turned a sickly greenish gray. 9 figures, he whispered, his mind visibly shattering. What? What are you talking about? That's impossible. He's just what Mr. Vance, Foster asked, her eyes narrowing to icy slits. A simple old man, easy to manipulate. Easy to have declared emotionally unstable by a compromised physician. Dr. Anderson, who had been frozen this whole time, finally found his voice, though it was an octave higher than before. This is an outrage. I am a respected surgeon. I will not be accused. You will be silent, Dr. Anderson, Foster commanded, not even bothering to look at him. Unless you wish to add interfering with a federal investigation to your list of charges. The state medical board takes a very dim view of that. David looked at me, his brain finally catching up, his eyes wide with a new kind of panic. Dad, this is a mistake. This woman is lying. She's trying to steal your money. I was protecting you, Emily. Yeah, Ms. Foster said, turning her head slightly toward the ICU room, where my daughter, my flesh and blood, lay waiting for her cue. The critically ill patient. Nurse Grace, I believe you have something for us. Grace stepped forward from the nurse's station. She had been waiting. Her face was calm, but her eyes were burning with the righteous fury of someone who had seen too much. I do, ma'am, Grace said. She held up her personal cell phone. I was Mr. Crawford's wife's nurse during her last days, Grace explained to Foster, but her words were for everyone. Mrs. Sarah Crawford. She made me promise to watch over her husband. She suspected Mr. Vance was unprincipled. She could feel his greed. Grace's gaze hardened. I saw Dr. Anderson and Mr. Vance meeting in the cafeteria last week, laughing. I knew Anderson owed David a fortune in gambling debts. So when they brought Ms. Vance in for a car accident, when I knew she had walked into the ER complaining of a mild headache, she walked in. I interrupted, the blood draining from my face. The lie was deeper than I knew. Walked in at 3 p.m., Mr. Crawford. Perfectly fine, Grace confirmed. They've had her on a mild sedative preparing for your arrival. So I placed this phone set to record audio in the room's ventilation grate. Foster nodded. My team has already backed up the file. Perhaps you'd all like to hear the highlights. She pressed play. The small speaker on the phone was shockingly clear in the terrible silence of the ICU. First, Dr. Anderson's voice. Cool, clinical. The old man is predictable. The 2 a.m. call, the panic. He'll be putty in our hands. You're sure he'll sign the POA? Then David's voice. Smooth, confident. My son-in-law. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. He thinks I'm his devoted son, helping him with his complicated retirement papers. He's a sentimental fool. My chest tightened. A fool. That's what he called me. And then, her voice. My daughter's voice. Cold and sharp as glass. Just make sure the signature is clean, David. And Anderson, you get your $500,000 after the trust is liquidated, not before. $500,000. The recording continued, a grotesque audio play. Anderson's voice again. It's a clean plan. He signs the POA. I declare Emily medically unconscious, requiring long-term care that only David, as her husband with POA, can manage. You use his POA to access his assets, claiming it's to pay for Emily's care. By the time anyone figures it out, you'll be gone and I'll be retired. And the old man? David asked. Emily's voice answered. And this was the part that finally broke me. This was the part that killed the last piece of the girl I loved. He's 70, she said, bored. He just lost his wife. Now his daughter is a vegetable. The grief, the shock. He'll have a real heart attack within 6 months. And if he doesn't. David finished for her, his voice a loving purr. We'll help him along. A little too much heart medication. A fall down the stairs. Anderson can sign the death certificate. Natural causes. A tragic end, to a tragic story. Ms. Foster pressed stop. The hallway was utterly, devastatingly silent. Dr. Anderson was shaking his face, a mask of sweat. David. David was just staring at the phone in Foster's hand. He wasn't even looking at me. He was calculating. "That recording is illegal," David whispered, his voice hoarse. It was the last desperate move of a cornered rat. "You can't use that. It's inadmissible. It's entrapment." Foster smiled, a thin, sharp, dangerous smile that did not reach her eyes. "Mr. Vance, we are not in a courtroom. Yet. This is an administrative investigation by the medical board, and that recording is more than enough to have Dr. Anderson's license revoked immediately. As for you, the SEC has different rules about evidence regarding conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and I assure you, they will listen to it." "You!" Anderson lunged not for the door, but for the phone. He tried to grab it from Foster's hand. The two large men who had been silent until now moved. They didn't just stop him. They neutralized him. In one fluid motion, Anderson was pinned against the wall, his arm twisted hard behind his back, a zip-tie cuff snapping onto his wrist. "Dr. Alistair Anderson," one of the men said, his voice a low rumble, "you are being detained pending investigation." David was hyperventilating, spitefully looking at me, his eyes searching, desperate, trying to find the old, weak, foolish Henry. Dad, please, they're twisting everything. We were just trying to what, David?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like my own. It was cold. It was hard. It was the voice of the man who built an empire. "Trying to help me along." The blood drained from his face. He knew that I knew everything. Dr. Anderson was the first to break. He was a gambler, and he knew when the hand was lost. This is a misunderstanding. I was just following Mr. Vance's instructions. He pressured me, he threatened me, he knows about my debts." "Which you have just confirmed, Doctor," Ms. Foster said, nodding to one of her men. The man, who was the size of a refrigerator, stepped forward and took Dr. Anderson's arm. "You are being detained by hospital security, Doctor, pending a full investigation by the medical board and the SEC." As Anderson was led away, protesting and sweating, David just stared at me. His face was a mask of utter disbelief. The entire world he had built, the entire reality he had manufactured, had just been vaporized. He turned to Ms. Foster, his voice a hoarse whisper. 9 figures. 9 figures. "Mr. Crawford's net worth is not your concern," Foster replied. She told me she told me." David's mind was snapping. He looked at me, then at the hospital security guard who was now approaching him. He knew he was beaten. But the rage of being conned by his own partner, that was something new. The guard took David's arms and cuffed his hands behind his back. The sharp click of the handcuffs echoed in the hallway. David didn't seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on room 3, on the hospital bed, on my daughter Emily, who was still lying there pretending to be unconscious, her eyes closed. David's face contorted not with fear, but with a pure, venomous fury. "You!" he screamed, lunging toward the bed held back only by the guard. "You lied to me!" The hallway, which had been buzzing with whispers, went completely silent. "You lied," David roared, his voice cracking. "You told me he was a poor, pathetic old man. You told me he had a house and a small pension, 9 figures, $1 billion. You played me. You used me to get to him." He was confessing to everything right there, admitting his own part in the con, all because his pride was more wounded than his criminal record. "You're the one who lied," he shrieked at my daughter's still comatose form. And then Emily's eyes snapped open. It wasn't a slow awakening. It was immediate, sharp, aware. David stopped yelling. He froze. Even the security guard paused. She didn't look at him. She didn't even acknowledge the man she had planned all this with, the man who was now being arrested, the man she had shared a bed with. She slowly, deliberately turned her head on the pillow. Her eyes bypassed everyone, Foster, Grace, the guards, until they found me. I looked into my daughter's eyes, expecting to see what shame, fear, regret. I saw none of it. I saw a hatred so deep, so cold, so absolute. It stopped my heart. She pushed herself up onto her elbows. The IV tube pulled tight. "You," she hissed. Her voice was not the weak voice of a patient. It was a low, guttural growl that chilled my blood far more than David's screams ever could. "You let her die." I was confused. "Emily, what are you talking about?" "You let her die!" she screamed, her voice breaking with a pain that was terrifyingly real. "You let my mother die. You let her die in this very hospital in pain while you sat on billions of dollars." The accusation hung in the air, thick and toxic. Ms. Foster and the two security guards froze. Even the hospital security officer, who was still holding David, looked confused. David himself had stopped struggling, an expression of pure, shocked calculation on his face. He hadn't expected this. This wasn't part of his plan. I was completely adrift. My mind couldn't make sense of her words. "Emily," I stammered, taking a step toward her bed. What are you talking about?" "Honey, you're not well. Your mother, Sarah, she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was terminal. There was no cure. Nothing could have saved her." Emily let out a sound. It wasn't a laugh. It was a dry, broken bark of pure, agonizing contempt. The police officers who had moved to cuff her paused, taken aback by the raw hatred in her eyes. "Nothing," she spat. "There was nothing." She was fully sitting up now, her hospital gown bunched around her, her face pale and streaked with tears that were no longer fake. This was real. This was the source of her poison. "David found it," she said, her voice trembling with a rage so deep it seemed to shake the room. "He investigated. Because he loved me. Because he couldn't stand seeing me so broken over Mom's death. He looked into everything." "Looked into what, Emily?" "There was nothing to find. The clinic in Germany," she shrieked, and the sound made the monitors beep faster. "The experimental immunotherapy trial in Munich. Does that ring a bell, Dad?" I felt my blood run cold. "He found the correspondence." Emily pushed on her words, tumbling out a confession of her own pain. "A private clinic. They had a new treatment. A chance. An 80% chance of remission. All it cost was money. $5 million. Ms. Foster was staring at me now. I could feel her icy gaze reassessing, questioning. "They sent the files to you," Emily sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "The hospital here forwarded her case file to them, Mom, and they sent their offer. To you. Because you were the one paying for everything. David found the letter. He found it in your desk 6 months ago, hidden under your old engineering blueprints." She was right. I remembered the letter. I remembered the heavy cream-colored envelope. "I saw it, Dad," she whispered, her voice dropping to a terrifying broken hiss. "I saw the letter with the 80% chance. And I saw what you wrote on it. In your own handwriting. In that big red, arrogant pen you always use." She took a shuddering breath, her eyes locking onto mine, filled with a lifetime of betrayal. "You wrote no." "Emily," I started, but my voice was gone. "You wrote no," she screamed. "You looked at an 80% chance to save your wife, to save my mother. And you wrote no." She turned to Ms. Foster, to the police, to Nurse Grace, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Do you understand? He let her die, he let her waste away in that hospital bed in agony, all because he was too cheap to spend $5 million. $5 million out of billions. Dad. She said, her voice suddenly terrifyingly calm again. David told me. He told me you were a monster who valued money more than his own family. I didn't want to believe him, but I saw the proof with my own eyes. He let her die. She repeated, not to me, but to the room, to the world. My father killed my mother to save money. I stood there frozen. I remembered the letter. I remembered the conversation. I remembered Sarah's hand in mine, her voice weak but firm. Promise me, Henry. Don't tell her. Let her be angry at the cancer, not at me. Don't let her live with the what if I had promised. I looked at my daughter, her face twisted in a mask of righteous hatred. I looked at Ms. Foster, whose face was now an unreadable professional mask. I looked at Nurse Grace, whose expression of support had been replaced with one of dawning, sickening horror. I couldn't speak. I couldn't defend myself, because to defend myself I would have to betray my wife. He's a monster, Emily whispered as the police finally gently cuffed her wrists. He's a monster, and he deserves to lose everything. I found it 6 months ago, Emily sobbed, her words directed at Ms. Foster and the officers, but they were daggers aimed straight at my heart. I was in his office, looking for old photos of Mom. It was hidden, tucked under a pile of old engineering blueprints. She looked at me, her eyes leaking tears of pure, unadulterated acid. It was an envelope from a clinic in Munich. I didn't understand the medical terms, so I showed it to David. Of course, she showed it to David, the fox she had invited into our home. He's the one who figured it out. She continued, her voice gaining a terrible righteous strength. He's the one who made the international calls. It was a cure, Dad. An experimental immunotherapy trial. An 80% chance of remission. 80%. They were saving people. People just like her. I tried to speak, to say her name, to say Sarah, but my throat was clamped shut. David told me what it meant, Emily cried, her voice echoing in the stunned silence of the hallway. He told me they were willing to take Mom as a patient. All they needed was the money. $5 million. And the letter. The acceptance letter. It was addressed to you. Because you held the purse strings. You were the only one who could say yes. She took a ragged, shuddering breath, the police officers holding her arms gently, letting her unleash this final torrent. And I saw it, Dad, she whispered, her voice dropping to a terrifying, broken hiss. I saw the letter with the 80% chance, and I saw what you wrote on it, in your own handwriting, in that big red, arrogant pen you always use. She paused, locking her gaze onto mine, her eyes filled with a lifetime of perceived betrayal. You wrote no. Emily, I finally managed a useless, breathless sound. You wrote no, she screamed, the sound ripping from her. You looked at an 80% chance to save your wife, to save my mother. And you wrote no, David told me. He told me you were a monster. He said you'd rather keep your precious secret money than save her. He said you watched her die, you watched her suffer, and you could have stopped it. You let her die, you killed her. I stood there frozen. The accusation was so monstrous, so complete, and partially true. I remembered that letter. I remembered the heavy cream-colored envelope. I remembered my hand shaking as I took that same red pen. I remembered looking into Sarah's eyes as I wrote no on that very paper. I saw Miss Foster's professional mask falter. For the first time, she looked at me with something other than respect. I saw Nurse Grace's face, her expression of support collapsing into one of dawning, sickening horror. She thought she was helping a victim only to discover she was protecting a monster. The entire hallway, the police, the security guards, they all looked at me. They all believed her. and I couldn't say a word. I couldn't tell them that Sarah had been the one to refuse, that she had held my hand and begged me, her voice weak but firm. Promise me, Henry. Don't tell her. Let her be angry at the cancer, not at me. Don't let her live with the what if. I had promised. I had given my word to my dying wife. And in this moment, that promise was a gag in my mouth, silencing me as my own daughter destroyed me. Take her away, Ms. Foster said quietly, her voice now flat, turning to the officers. The spell was broken. The police officers began to lead Emily down the hall. David, still cuffed, was being led behind her. He looked back at me over his shoulder, a look of pure, triumphant hatred. He had lost the money, but he had still won. He had destroyed my family. Emily stopped at the end of the hallway. She turned around one last time. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was a mask of cold, righteous judgment. "You're a monster!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the sterile walls. "You're worse than him. He just wanted money. You let her die." The officers pulled her through the double doors. "You deserve to lose everything," she screamed before the doors hissed shut. "You deserve to be alone. I hope you rot with your money." And just like that, I was alone in the hallway. Utterly, completely alone, surrounded by the ruins of my life, condemned by a truth I couldn't tell. The drive home was silent. Ms. Foster, a woman who controlled billions of dollars with the precision of a hawk, sat in the passenger seat of my old Volvo. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The air in the car was thick with what was unsaid. My daughter's final words, "You let her die. You killed her," echoed in my head louder than the rattling of the old engine. We arrived at my quiet, modest house, the place I had shared with Sarah for 40 years, the place that now felt like a crime scene. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was cold. Ms. Foster followed me, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She stood in the middle of my simple living room, looking at the faded photographs on the mantelpiece. Sarah and me young, Emily on a tricycle, a happy family, a lie. "Mr. Crawford," she finally said. Her voice careful, professional, but the ice was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. "Henry, that accusation in the hallway." I stood with my back to her, staring at the main portrait of Sarah, the one painted 10 years ago, when she was still vibrant, her eyes full of life. "If what Emily said is true," Foster continued, it fundamentally changes the legal landscape. It's no longer just financial fraud. It implies a motive, a different, darker motive for everything." I heard the unspoken word, murder. "It's true," I said. My voice was hoarse. It didn't even sound like mine. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "What?" "It's true," I repeated, turning to face her. The look on her face was no longer professional. It was one of horror. I am the one who refused the treatment. I am the one who took that red pen and wrote no on that letter from the clinic in Munich." She was speechless. This woman of iron, who had faced down corporate raiders and hostile governments, was staring at me as if I had just confessed to the most heinous crime imaginable. I don't understand," she stammered. "Your wife, an 80% chance. Why?" "Because," I said, walking past her, "you haven't heard the entire story. No one has. I've been keeping a promise." I walked into my small study, the one David had so casually dismissed as the old man's junk room. I went to the heavy oak bookshelf, the one Sarah and I had bought at a flea market on our honeymoon. I pulled out a worn copy of Moby Dick. Behind it was not a book. It was the dial for a wall safe. Ms. Foster watched in silence as I spun the combination. The lock clicked, heavy and final. "I didn't refuse the treatment, Ms. Foster," I said, pulling the heavy steel door open. "Sarah did." I reached inside past old stock certificates and property deeds. My fingers found the cold, hard plastic of a digital hard drive. I wanted to sell everything. I whispered, my voice finally breaking. I would have drained the entire trust just for that 1% chance. But Sarah, she knew, she always knew me better than I knew myself. I turned, holding the hard drive, and she knew this day might come. She knew Emily. She knew David. And she left us one final piece of evidence. "What is that?" Foster asked. "It's a video diary," I replied, my hand trembling as I held it. Sarah's last words. She told me to watch it only if Emily ever found out about the letter. She told me, "Watch this when you need me to save you one last time." Ms. Foster's eyes widened. "I think," she said, her voice regaining its professional edge, "we need to watch that, right now." We sat in my study, the hard drive humming softly as it connected to my laptop. The room was dark save for the glow of the screen. "I got that letter on a Tuesday," I began, my voice quiet, forcing myself back into the memory. "I didn't just see it. I tore it open like a starving man. An 80% chance. To me, that wasn't a chance, it was a certainty. It was a miracle." I looked at Ms. Foster. Her face was neutral, waiting. "I called my bank in Geneva immediately. I told them to be prepared to liquidate $20 million, just in case. $5 million for the treatment, the rest for anything else they needed. A private jet. The best doctors. I didn't care. I was going to save my wife." Flashback begins. I ran into her hospital room, that heavy cream envelope clutched in my hand like it was the Holy Grail. "Sarah," I shouted, my voice breaking. "Sarah, we found it. There's a clinic in Germany. They think they can help." Sarah was so thin. The cancer had taken everything from her, except her eyes. Her eyes were still bright, still her. She looked at me at the letter, and she didn't smile. She just looked tired. "Henry," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "Come here. Sit." "No, you don't understand," I insisted, kneeling by her bed, trying to force the letter into her frail hand. "It's an 80% chance, Sarah, 80, we can go today. I'll arrange the jet. We can—" "Henry," she interrupted, and her voice, though weak, had a firmness that stopped me cold. She put her hand on top of mine, covering the letter. "My love, stop." "But Sarah—" "I'm tired," she said. "Just tired. I've been fighting for 3 years. I've had more chemicals pumped into me than a science experiment. I'm done. I don't want to fight anymore." "This isn't a fight," I pleaded. "This is a cure. It's a chance." "A chance for what?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "A chance to spend the last 6 months of my life in a sterile lab in Munich, hooked to more machines, sicker than I am now from the treatment, so I can maybe get another year. Another 2. She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. "That's not living, Henry. That's just postponing." She coughed, a dry, painful sound that tore at my insides. "I want to go home," she whispered. "We will. After Germany, we'll—" "No, Henry. I want to go home now. I want to die in our bed. I want to sit on our porch and watch the sunset. I want to hear the sound of the wind chimes you hung." Her eyes filled with tears, the first ones she'd let herself cry in months. "Emily graduates in 4 weeks," she said, her voice cracking. "I want to see it, even if it's just on a video. I can't do that from a hospital in Germany." I was broken. I fell forward, my head resting on her frail body, and I sobbed. "Please," I begged. "Please don't leave me, don't do this." And she stroked my hair. "I'm not leaving you, Henry. I'm just done. And you have to let me go. You have to let me do this my way. This is the last decision I get to make." I finally looked up, my face wet with tears. "You have to promise me something," she said, her gaze intense, grabbing my hand with surprising strength. "You have to promise me you will never tell Emily about this letter." "What, Sarah, why?" "Because," she said, her voice fierce, "I know our daughter. She will never forgive herself. She will live her entire life with the what if. She will think there was a miracle and we didn't take it. She'll be angry. She'll be guilty. She'll never heal. Do you understand? It's better. It's kinder. To let her be angry at the cancer. Let her be angry at God. But do not let her be angry at me for giving up. And do not let her be angry at you for something you couldn't control." "But I can control this," I argued. "No, Henry. This is my choice." Her eyes were pleading. "Promise me. Promise me you will let her believe there was nothing else we could do. Promise me you will protect her from this. Promise me you will let me go." I looked at her, my wife of 40 years, the love of my life, asking me to let her die. It was the most brutal, agonizing moment of my existence. I promise," I whispered. She sighed, a long, final release of tension. "Good," she said. "Now, that letter. I don't want it in this room. I don't want to see it again. Do what you have to do." Flashback ends. I turned back to Ms. Foster in my dark study. "She died 3 weeks later," I said, my voice hollow. 2 days after watching the video of Emily's graduation. So I went back to my desk. I took my red pen, and I wrote no on that letter. I wrote no because I had promised her. I wrote no to protect my daughter from a truth I thought she couldn't handle. It was the hardest, most agonizing act of love in my entire life. Miss Foster was silent, her professional mask completely gone. She looked stunned. "And I kept that promise," I finished. "I kept it even when my own daughter stood in that hallway and called me a monster. I let her believe it, because I had promised her mother. I kept that promise." I told Miss Foster, my voice thick with a grief so old it felt new again. "I kept it even when my own daughter stood in that ICU hallway and called me a monster. I let her believe it. I let her hate me. I was willing to let the whole world, including you, Ms. Foster, think I was a cruel, cheap old man. All to protect Emily from that final agonizing what if, the one her mother died to spare her from." I picked up the small, cold hard drive from the safe. My fingers traced the label on it. It was in Sarah's weak, shaky handwriting. Just one word. Henry. But Sarah, she knew me. She knew I would keep my promise, but she also knew what it would cost me. She knew that one day someone, maybe David, maybe even Emily herself, might corner me with this exact truth. She knew that my love for Emily and my promise to her would be used against me. She recorded a video diary in her last weeks. She told me to keep this. She made me swear. "Henry," she said, her voice already so thin, "don't watch this. Put it away. But if a day ever comes, a day when you truly need me, when your promise to me is destroying you, when you need me to save you one last time, then you watch this, and you show it to whoever needs to see it." I looked at Ms. Foster. The hard drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I never thought I would need it. I was going to take this secret to my grave. But today my daughter accused me of killing her mother. Today she helped a con man try to destroy me based on that lie. I placed the hard drive on the desk between us. The small black rectangle seemed to absorb all the light in the room. Foster, who had been listening with a profound, stunned silence, slowly leaned forward. Her professional mask was back, but her eyes were different. They were compassionate. She looked at the drive, then at me. The silence in the study was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the clock Sarah had loved. Finally, Ms. Foster nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. "I think, Henry," she said, her voice soft but firm, "that truly needing her arrived about 3 hours ago." She gestured to my laptop. "I think now is the time." I plugged the hard drive into my laptop. The small blue light blinked, and a file icon labeled "For Emily" appeared on my desktop. Ms. Foster leaned in, her professional demeanor replaced by a raw human anticipation. I clicked it. The screen went black, and then there she was. My Sarah. She was propped up against the pillows in our bed at home. The afternoon sun streamed in through the window she loved. She was so thin, so frail. Her skin was like paper. The cancer had ravaged her body. But her eyes were the same. They were bright, clear, and looked directly into the camera with an unshakable, terrifying clarity. She smiled a weak, painful smile. "Emily," she whispered, and just hearing her voice again, even that thin, reedy version felt like a physical blow. "Emily, my love, if you are watching this, it means something has gone terribly wrong. It means your father is in trouble. And it's probably because of me, or because of that man you're with." I gasped. Ms. Foster put a hand on my arm. "I need you to listen to me, baby." Sarah continued, her voice gaining a little strength, the strength she always had when she talked about our daughter. "I know what you must be thinking. I know what you might have found. You are so smart, just like your father. You leave no stone unturned. And I know you found the letter from the clinic in Germany." Ms. Foster and I looked at each other. She knew all of it. "I'm sure you saw the 80% chance," Sarah said, a small, sad laugh escaping her lips. "I'm sure you saw the $5 million price tag. And I am sure, I am positive, that you saw that your father refused it." She paused, closing her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. "And now I need you to listen to the truth. The truth I made him promise he would never tell you because I didn't want you to live with this burden. But I knew him. I knew he would keep his promise even if it destroyed him. So, I'm breaking the promise for him." Sarah looked right into the camera as if she was looking past it through time directly into Emily's soul. "I was the one who refused the treatment, Emily, not him. Your father," she said, her voice breaking for the first time, "your wonderful, noble, sentimental fool of a father. He was ready to sell the world for me. He came into my hospital room that day. He was flying. He had that letter in his hand like it was a winning lottery ticket. He was ready to liquidate the entire trust to move us to Munich that night. He was crying, Emily. He was so happy. He thought he had found a miracle." She took a shaky breath. "And I had to be the one to tell him no. I was tired, baby," she whispered, tears now rolling down her own paper-thin cheeks. So tired. 3 years of fighting. 3 years of poison and scalpels and false hope. I didn't have another fight left in me. And I was not going to spend the last 6 months of my life in a sterile lab in Germany, hooked to machines, sick as a dog from the treatment itself, just for a chance at another year. She leaned closer to the camera. "I wanted to die at home, Henry. In our bed. I wanted to sit on our porch and watch the sunset. I wanted to hear the wind chimes you hung." Her voice cracked. "And I wanted to see you graduate. Your graduation was in 4 weeks. I couldn't do that from a hospital in Germany. So I told him no. I begged him. I made him promise. He fought me, Emily. He argued. He pleaded. He said we had to try, and I told him this was my choice. The last decision I would ever get to make. I told him his job wasn't to save me. It was to let me go my way." The video was silent for a moment, just the sound of her weak breathing. "And the letter," she finally said. "He kept it on the nightstand for a week like he could change my mind. Finally, I told him to get rid of it. He couldn't. He couldn't bring himself to throw it away. So I gave him my red pen. I said, 'Henry, write no on this. Write it and let it be done. Let it be my decision, not yours.' And he did. He did it for me. He cried as he did it. It was the hardest, most agonizing act of love in his entire life." She was sobbing now. "So, Emily, if you ever see that letter, if you ever think your father let me die, you know the truth. I chose peace. I chose home. And he loved me enough to honor it. Don't you dare let that man David or anyone twist that. Don't you dare let him use my death as a weapon against your father." The screen went black. Ms. Foster and I sat in the darkness of the study for a long time. She was discreetly wiping her eyes. I wasn't even trying to hide my tears. But the video is still playing," Ms. Foster said. I looked. A new file had started. The timestamp was 2 days later. Sarah was back on the screen. She looked weaker, but her eyes were full of a new cold fire. "Emily," she said, her voice a harsh whisper, "I need to warn you about David." "But Emily—" Sarah's voice was a harsh whisper, now completely different from the loving mother moments before. This was the woman I knew, the strategist, the protector. "I need to warn you about David." My head snapped up. Ms. Foster leaned closer to the laptop screen. "I have seen him," Sarah said, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "I've seen him when he thinks no one is looking. I've seen the way he looks at you. And it's not love, baby. It's assessment. Like he's measuring a prize. And—" she took a rattling breath. "I've seen the way he looks at your father's desk. The way his eyes linger on the mail. The way he asks quiet, careful questions about our finances, disguised as polite concern. He's a hunter, Emily. And he's hunting us." I wasn't sure," Sarah whispered. "I thought, maybe it's the medication. Maybe I'm paranoid. So, I did something your father doesn't know about. I used the last of my strength to make one call. To a private investigator. The one we used in the 90s for the H-composite hostile takeover bid." The screen flickered. It cut to a grainy black and white video. I recognized my own study, my desk. The camera angle was high from the corner bookshelf. Sarah had installed a hidden camera. We watched as the video, time-stamped 2 weeks before her death, showed David Vance entering my study. He walked straight to my desk. He pulled a small silver tool from his pocket, a lockpick. In less than 10 seconds, he had my locked center drawer open. Ms. Foster let out a small, sharp gasp. He didn't just look, he searched. He pulled out my bank statements, the decoy statements I kept. He pulled out my will. He pulled out the insurance policies. He took out his phone and with calm, methodical precision, he photographed every single page. The video cut back to Sarah, her face grim. "He's not just a gold digger, Emily. He's a professional." "My investigator," Sarah said, her voice heavy, ran his name. "David Vance. He's been married twice before. His first wife, she was an heiress from Boston. She disappeared on their honeymoon yacht in the Caribbean. Her body was never found. He inherited everything. His second wife, a tech executive from San Francisco. She died in a tragic hiking accident. A fall. He inherited everything from her, too. Both women were wealthy. Both women died unexpectedly. Both times he was the sole beneficiary." Sarah leaned so close to the camera, her face filled the screen, her eyes pleading. "He's a predator, Emily. He's not in love with you. He's using you. He's using your grief, your pain, your anger. He's using me as a weapon to get to your father. He thinks your father is just a simple retired engineer. He thinks your father is the next target. I can't protect you anymore, baby. Sarah sobbed, the strength finally leaving her. So I'm leaving you this. Don't let him win. Don't. The screen went black. The file ended. I collapsed forward, my hands on the desk. My breath was gone. The room was spinning. He wasn't just a con man. He wasn't just a greedy son-in-law. He was a killer, a serial predator. And he had been in my house. He had married my daughter. He had planned to help me along with a fall down the stairs, just like his last wife. It wasn't just about money. It was about murder. Ms. Foster stood up slowly. Her face was pale, but her eyes were like blue flames. She snapped her laptop shut. Henry, I said, my voice shaking. He's in custody. But Dr. Anderson isn't. He has accomplices. Mr. Crawford. Ms. Foster interrupted, her voice a blade of pure cold steel. That man is not David Vance. He is a predator named Leo Thorne, and he just made the last mistake of his life. Foster, I said, grabbing her arm. Find him. Find everything. I don't care what it costs. I want him buried so deep he'll never see the light of day again. Ms. Foster's team didn't just start an investigation. They declared war. They were a machine, a quiet, terrifyingly efficient machine fueled by my money and now by a righteous fury that matched my own. The first call she made was to her counterpart in Zurich. The second was to a private investigations firm in D.C. that, as she put it, finds ghosts. They started with the name David Vance. Within 12 hours, the first report came back. It was simple. David Vance, as he existed, was a phantom. The Social Security number he gave Emily was fake. It belonged to a man who had died in 1982. The college degree from Wharton fabricated. The job at the high-end financial firm he'd been fired 6 weeks ago for irregularities, a fact he had conveniently hidden from Emily. So he's a con man, I said to Foster over the phone. He's much more than that, Henry, she replied, her voice grim. By the end of the first day, they found him. His real name, Leo Thorne. And with that name came a cascade of filth. He was wanted for questioning in 3 states. Arizona for the accidental drowning of his first wife, an heiress from a Boston shipping family. Her entire fortune, an estimated $20 million, had been transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands just days before her tragic boating accident. Then there was California. His second wife, a Silicon Valley tech executive, died in a hiking accident. She fell from a cliff. He was the only witness. He inherited her $45 million in stock options. The police had suspected him in both cases, but Leo was smart. He was a ghost. He liquidated the assets, moved the money, and vanished only to reappear in a new city with a new name, ready to find his next victim. But that led to the question that chilled me to my core. Foster, I don't understand, I said, pacing my study. His other wives were already rich. Emily has nothing. Her name isn't on any of my accounts. She has college debt. Why her? Why go through this elaborate charade, this fake accident, just to get your hands on my modest $1.5 million estate? That's the question my team just answered, Foster said, her voice tight. He wasn't after your $1.5 million, Henry. He was after the entire 9-figure trust. But how could he possibly know? Only you, me, and Sarah knew the full extent. He hired someone who did know, Foster interrupted. My investigators found a payment, a $100,000 transfer from one of Leo Thorne's Cayman accounts 3 years ago. The recipient was a private investigator in New York. An investigator. Not just any PI, Foster said. A corporate espionage specialist. This man wasn't hired to find a person. He was hired to find money. He had been tracking you, Henry Crawford, the reclusive inventor of H Composite, for 3 years, even before Sarah passed away. The pieces clicked into place, each one more horrifying than the last. The chance meeting, the romance, the wedding. He didn't meet Emily. I whispered, the realization sucking the air from my lungs. He targeted her. He orchestrated the entire relationship. He knew she was my only child, my only heir. He studied us. He found her. He became the perfect man, the supportive partner. Exactly, Foster confirmed. He became the man she needed. And then he waited. He waited for Sarah to pass, knowing Emily would be emotionally vulnerable. He became her rock, her confidant, all while planting the seeds that you were unstable, that you were the real enemy. His plan was brilliant. It was monstrous. He wasn't just going to steal my pension. He was going to use my grieving, manipulated daughter as the key to unlock my entire empire. The plan was simple. One, use Emily's grief over Sarah's death to drive a wedge between us. 2, use the letter from Germany as the ultimate proof that I was a monster, ensuring Emily's total loyalty to him. 3, stage the fake accident to get me, the senile, grieving old man, to sign a full power of attorney. 4, with that POA, he would have gained access to the Geneva Trust. He would have liquidated everything, hundreds of millions of dollars. 5, and then the final act. A fall down the stairs for me. An overdose for his grieving, unstable wife, Emily. He would inherit everything. A tragic story. A perfect crime. He's still in custody, correct? I asked, my voice shaking. Leo Thorne is in a federal holding cell. He's not going anywhere, Foster assured me. The evidence of interstate fraud and the murder investigations in Arizona and California are overwhelming. He's done. Good, I said. And Dr. Anderson? There was a pause, a cold, heavy pause. That, Foster said, is the new problem. Anderson was only part of the local fraud. He posted bail an hour ago. He's in the wind. I stood up. He's an accomplice, and he's desperate. He knows we have that recording. My team is tracking him, Foster said. But a man like Leo Thorne, a man who plans for 3 years, you have to assume he doesn't just have one accomplice. He may have others we don't know about. The plan, it wasn't just about a house. It wasn't just about my small decoy savings. Ms. Foster laid it out, and the scale of his ambition was breathtaking. It was a 3-stage operation. Stage 1 was what we had just witnessed, the deception. Use Emily's genuine, agonizing grief over Sarah's death as a lever. Plant seeds of doubt about me. For 6 months, he had been her shoulder to cry on, all the while whispering, "He seems confused, doesn't he? He's so forgetful. I'm worried about him." He cultivated the image of me as a senile, grieving old man. The fake car accident was the final act, a manufactured crisis designed to rush me into signing a full power of attorney. Stage 2 was the heist. With that POA, David No Leo wouldn't have just accessed my local bank account. He would have presented it in Geneva. Ms. Foster confirmed they had received preliminary inquiries from a Mr. Vance just last month, testing the waters, asking about signatory authority. He would have had legal control over the entire Crawford Sterling Trust. He would have liquidated everything, hundreds of millions of dollars. He would have drained my life's work in less than a week. Stage 3, that was the one that made my blood run cold. Stage 3 was the cleanup. Once the money was secured in his untraceable offshore accounts, he would have been the sole trustee of 2 unstable people. Me, the senile old man, and Emily, his critically ill wife. He would have killed you both, Ms. Foster said, her voice flat, stating a fact. A fall down the stairs for you, a tragic secondary complication from her head injury for Emily. He would have been the sole grieving survivor, inheriting an empire he had stolen, just as he had done twice before. and he had almost succeeded. He had laid the groundwork for 3 years. Ms. Foster's investigators found the wire transfers. 3 years ago, before Sarah even got her final diagnosis, Leo Thorne paid $100,000 to a corporate espionage specialist in New York. The job to find the real wealth of Henry Crawford, the reclusive inventor of H Composite. Once he found the 9-figure trust, he needed a key. He found Emily. The chance meeting at that charity gala. He paid the caterer to get on the staff list. The shared interests, all meticulously researched from her social media. The deep connection, forged from the grief he knew was coming. He targeted my daughter, romanced her, and married her, all with the sole intention of positioning himself to destroy her father and eventually her. He had turned my daughter into a weapon against me. And the worst part, she had no idea she was just as disposable as I was. Leo Thorne is in a federal holding cell, Miss Foster assured me, her voice pulling me back to the present. He's not going anywhere. The evidence of interstate fraud and the murder investigations in Arizona and California are overwhelming. He's done. Good, I said, my voice hoarse. And Dr. Anderson? There was a long, cold pause. That, Ms. Foster said, her voice tight with frustration, is the new problem. Anderson was only part of the local fraud, so his bail was set lower. He posted it an hour ago. He's in the wind. Vanished. I stood up the room, suddenly feeling too small. He's an accomplice. He's desperate, and he knows we have that recording. My team is tracking him, Foster said. But a man like Leo Thorne, a man who plans for 3 years, you have to assume he doesn't just have one accomplice. He may have others we don't know about. I looked at the video file of Sarah still open on my laptop. Don't you dare let him use my death as a weapon against your father. Emily, she was still in custody at the hospital awaiting arraignment. She was alone, and she still believed I was the monster who had let her mother die. I knew what I had to do. I grabbed the laptop. Get me to the hospital, I said to Foster. I have to talk to my daughter. The hospital's custody wing was a different kind of ICU, a place where the sickness wasn't in the body, but in the soul. It was cold, sterile, and silent, except for the buzz of the fluorescent lights. A guard led me to a small, reinforced room. Emily was already there, sitting on a metal stool on the other side of a thick pane of glass. She looked small. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a standard-issue blue hospital gown. Her hair was stringy, and her face was pale, but when she saw me, her eyes filled with that same familiar hatred. "What do you want?" She spat, her voice ractive over the cheap intercom. "Come to gloat, come to tell me how you won." I didn't say anything. I just sat down on the stool on my side of the glass. I opened my laptop and placed it against the partition, the screen facing her. "I don't want to see your bank statements, old man," she sneered. "It's not from me," I said, my voice quiet. "It's from your mother." I pressed play. The file icon for Emily opened. Sarah's face filled the screen. Emily froze. Her sneer dissolved, her mouth falling open. She leaned forward, her eyes wide, disbelief warring with a desperate, sudden hope. She watched, mesmerized, as her mother began to speak. "Emily, my love, if you are watching this, it means something has gone terribly wrong." I watched my daughter's face as she listened to her mother's truth. When Sarah explained she was the one who had refused the treatment that she had chosen. Her end, Emily's hand flew to her mouth. A choked sob escaped her. No, she wouldn't." Then Sarah's voice grew firm. "I made him promise he would never tell you about this letter. Don't you dare let that man, David, twist that." Emily was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, David wouldn't. David loved me." And then the video file changed. The grainy black and white footage from my study filled the screen. She watched as David, her hero, her protector, calmly picked the lock to my desk. What? What is that? She whispered, her face ashen. She watched him pull out the documents. She watched him, methodical and cold, photograph every single page. The video cut back to Sarah. He's been married twice before Emily. His first wife disappeared. His second wife, a hiking accident. He's a predator, Emily. He's not in love with you. He's using you. The final devastating words from her mother hit her like a physical blow. Emily recoiled from the screen as if it were on fire. She let out a sound, a terrible primal wail of a soul tearing in two. She stared at the blank screen, her entire body shaking. He told me. She stammered, not to me, but to the glass, to herself. He told me you were the monster. He told me you hid the letter. He told me you were so greedy you let her die. She looked up at me, her eyes no longer filled with hatred, but with a dawning, bottomless horror. I helped him. She collapsed forward, her forehead pressing against the cold glass, her body convulsing with sobs. I helped him, she cried, her voice muffled by the partition. I hated you. Oh God, I hated you. I faked the accident. I planned it with him. I wanted to punish you. I wanted to take everything from you, just like you. Just like I thought. You took her from me. He told me we'd use the money to build a new life. A life you didn't deserve. And I believed him. Oh God, Mom, Dad, what have I done? She slid from the stool, collapsing onto the floor on her side of the glass, a broken weeping heap. I stayed seated, my own tears falling silently. I placed my hand on the glass right where her head was. He used your love for her. I whispered, my voice thick. He used your pain. That's not your fault, Emily. She looked up, her face a ruin of tears and snot and utter self-loathing. But I did it. I helped him. I wanted you to suffer. I know, I said. She stared at me, her breath catching. You knew. And I'm still here, I said. She wept, her cries echoing through the sterile room. And for the first time in 2 long, agonizing years, I wasn't just grieving for my wife. I was grieving for my daughter, the one I had just lost, and maybe, just maybe, the one I had just found again. He's a murderer, she finally whispered, her eyes dark with a new cold fire that I recognized. It was Sarah's fire. He killed those other women. He was going to kill us. She stood up, her legs unsteady, but her gaze was firm. She looked me straight in the eye. I will testify, she said, her voice no longer a child's wail, but a woman's vow. I will tell them everything. I will destroy him. I pressed my palm flat against the cold, thick glass separating us. She flinched, her eyes red and swollen, looking at my hand, as if it might strike her. Emily, I said, my voice thick, listen to me. Your mother loved you, more than anything in this world, and I love you too. She shook her head, a violent, self-hating motion. No, you can't. Not after what I did. I tried to. He used your love for her. I interrupted, my voice firm, forcing her to meet my gaze. He found the deepest, most pure thing inside you, Emily. Your love for your mother, and he twisted it. He poisoned it. He turned it into a weapon. That is not your fault. That is his sin, not yours. She looked up at me, her breath hitching, her mind desperately wanting to believe me but drowning in the guilt. But I believed him, she cried. I helped him. I wanted you to suffer. I wanted you to lose everything because I thought. I know what you thought, I said softly. Because he made you think it. She finally hesitantly pressed her own small, trembling palm against the glass mirroring mine. Two hands separated by an inch of reinforced glass, but closer than we had been in 2 years. "You don't understand," she whispered, the tears starting again, but different now, not tears of rage but of confession. "You don't know what he showed me. It wasn't just the letter. It was everything." I waited, letting her speak. This was the poison that had to come out. "It started after the funeral," she confessed, her voice barely audible. He found documents, or he said he did. He had bank statements, insurance claims, all with your name on them." Her eyes squeezed shut as if reliving the moment. He showed me that 6 months before she died, you had stopped paying for her experimental treatments, the ones here in the States. He had an email, a fake email, from the insurance company and a reply from you saying the treatment was no longer financially viable. I felt my stomach clench. A lie. A complete fabrication. I had fought to keep those treatments going. "I didn't want to believe it," she sobbed. "But he had so much proof. He showed me you were liquidating assets before she even died. He said, he's not saving for her care, Emily. He's saving for his inheritance. He even had a forged copy of her will, one that cut me out. He said you forced her to sign it. He made me believe you were a monster, a cold-hearted accountant just waiting for her to die so you could be rich." I finally understood. It wasn't just one letter. It was a systematic, brilliant, evil campaign. He had built a prison of lies around her brick by brick until his was the only voice she could hear. "He made me hate you," she whispered, her voice raw. "And I let him." She looked up and the broken, weeping girl was gone. In her place was a woman forged in betrayal, her eyes now clear and cold with a fire I recognized. It was Sarah's fire. She stood up, her small frame rigid with a new terrifying resolve. She pressed her hand flat against the glass one last time. "He used me," she said, her voice no longer a whisper but a vow. "He used my love for Mom to make me hate you. He's not just a con man. He's evil, and he's not getting away with it." She looked me dead in the eye. "I will testify," she said. "I will tell them everything. I will destroy him." The trial was a media circus. They called it the billionaire ghost case. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed. I sat in the front row, right behind the prosecution table, with Ms. Foster at my side. Emily was further back under police guard, waiting to be called as a witness. Across the aisle sat Leo Thorne, no longer the charming David Vance. He was thin, pale, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Next to him, Dr. Anderson just stared at his hands, his career and life in ashes. Their high-priced lawyers looked smug, ready to tear us apart. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Alana Reyes, stood up. Her voice was cold and clear, cutting through the murmurs of the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "you are here today because of a plan. A plan not born of passion, but of cold, meticulous calculation. A plan to steal a fortune. A plan that required fraud, medical malpractice, and ultimately, conspiracy to commit murder." She pointed first at Anderson. "You will hear how this man, Dr. Alistair Anderson, a man who took an oath to do no harm, was so buried in gambling debts that he was willing to falsify medical records, fake a critical condition for a healthy woman, and conspire to have a grieving old man committed, all for a payout of $500,000. Then Reyes turned and pointed at Leo. "And you will hear," she said, her voice dropping, "about him. A predator who does not have a name but many. A ghost who moves from state to state, from life to life, leaving a trail of broken families and dead wives in his wake. You will hear how he targeted this family, how he researched them for years, how he seduced a grieving, vulnerable young woman, Emily Crawford, and poisoned her mind against her own father. You will hear how Leo Thorne was the puppet master in a scheme to steal a 9-figure fortune. Ms. Foster was called first to establish the facts. She was flawless. Mr. Crawford, she explained, has spent his life building an empire while living humbly. The defendant, Leo Thorne, discovered the existence of this empire and began a multi-year operation to acquire it. His marriage to Emily Crawford was not an act of love. It was the first step in a hostile takeover. The defense attorney objected. Hearsay conjecture. Overruled, the judge said. Please continue, Ms. Foster. Foster laid out the financial evidence. The wire transfers from Thorne's Cayman accounts to the private investigator. The forged documents he had already prepared to liquidate the Geneva Trust. The financial records from his previous 2 wives showing the exact same pattern: marriage, financial consolidation, and a mysterious, fatal accident. The jury was horrified. But the real blow came from Nurse Grace. She took the stand, her uniform crisp, her eyes steady. I was Mrs. Sarah Crawford's nurse, Grace said, her voice filling the courtroom. She knew. She told me to watch out for him. She said he was a hunter. Grace recounted everything. She told them how Emily had walked into the ER perfectly healthy, complaining of a mild headache. She told them how she saw Dr. Anderson and David laughing in the cafeteria. And she told them about the promise she made to Sarah. So you planted an audio recorder? The DA asked. I did, Grace said without flinching. I couldn't let them do to Henry what they were planning. Your Honor, the DA said, the prosecution would like to play the audio file recovered from room 3 of the St. Jude ICU. The defense went ballistic. Illegal recording inadmissible, the judge overruled them. Given that this recording was made in a hospital by a medical professional to prevent what she believed to be an active, ongoing crime against a patient, this court will hear it. The file was played. The speakers filled the courtroom with those terrible, clear voices. Dr. Anderson, the old man is predictable. He'll be putty in our hands. David/Leo. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. He's a sentimental fool. And then Emily's voice, cold and sharp. Just make sure the signature is clean, David. And Anderson, you get your $500,000 after the trust is liquidated. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The recording continued. The plan to declare me incompetent. The plot to use my POA to access the funds. And then the final chilling exchange. David/Leo's voice. And the old man, Emily's voice. He's 70. He just lost his wife. Now his daughter is a vegetable. The grief, the shock. He'll have a real heart attack within 6 months. And if he doesn't. David/Leo's voice. If he doesn't, we'll help him along. A little too much heart medication. A fall down the stairs. Anderson can sign the death certificate. Natural causes. A tragic end to a tragic story. The recording stopped. You could have heard a pin drop. The jury members were staring at Leo and Anderson. One woman on the jury was pale, her hand over her mouth. Leo Thorne just stared straight ahead, his mask finally gone, revealing the monster underneath. Then it was their turn. Leo's attorney, a man named Harrison, stood up. He was the opposite of Ms. Foster. He was all smooth charm, expensive tailoring, and a smile that felt like it had been polished. He didn't address the jury with anger. He addressed them with an air of sad, disappointed reason. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison began, his voice like warm honey. What you have just heard is a fantastic story. A tale of secret identities, vast fortunes, and convenient last-minute video diaries from a dying wife. It's a tragedy, all right, but the prosecution has the wrong villain. He turned and looked at me, not with hatred, but with a deep theatrical pity. The villain in this story, he said, is not the man in the defendant's box. It's the man in the front row, Mr. Henry Crawford. A murmur went through the courtroom. I could feel Ms. Foster tense beside me. Let's talk about Henry Crawford, Harrison said, walking slowly in front of the jury box. Not the humble retired engineer he pretended to be, but the man he really is. An eccentric, controlling multi-billionaire. A man so obsessed with his secrets and his money that he lied to his own family for their entire lives. He told you himself. Harrison's voice rose. He pretended to be a simple man, forcing his family to live a modest life, all while he sat on a 9-figure empire. Why to protect them or to control them? He paused, letting the question hang. And then, Harrison said, his voice dropping to a somber whisper, we come to the most tragic part of this story. Sarah Crawford, a dying woman. A woman who, by the prosecution's own admission, was offered an 80% chance at life. An 80% chance, and what did this man, this loving husband, this billionaire, do? He stabbed a finger in my direction. He wrote no. He wrote no, Harrison repeated, letting the words sink in. He let his wife die. He looked at her, looked at his billions, and decided she wasn't worth the $5 million investment. Objection. Ms. Foster was on her feet. Mischaracterization, the witness video. The defense is entitled to its narrative counselor, the judge said. Overruled. But tread carefully, Mr. Harrison. Harrison smiled. Of course, Your Honor. He turned back to the jury. The prosecution will show you a convenient edited video where Mrs. Crawford supposedly agrees to this. How convenient. A dying woman, no doubt coerced by the very man who controlled every cent she ever had. And that, he said, is where these two victims come in. He gestured to Leo and Emily. My client David Vance, or Leo Thorne, whatever name the prosecution wishes to use, fell in love with a broken woman. A woman, Emily, who was consumed by the grief of watching her mother die. A woman who 6 months ago found that letter from the German clinic. She found the proof that her own father had in her mind murdered her mother. What you heard on that tape, Harrison said, was not a plan for greed. It was a plan born of desperation. It was a desperate, misguided, and yes, illegal, but understandable, attempt by a grieving daughter and a loving husband to get justice for Sarah. They weren't trying to steal from Henry. They were trying to get what was rightfully theirs, what was owed to Emily, what was stolen from her mother. They faked an accident, he said, his voice full of compassion. Why not to get money for themselves, but to get Mr. Crawford, a man they saw as a mentally unstable, grieving and guilty individual, away from his own checkbook before he could waste the family's assets. They were trying to protect the estate. They were trying to do what was right. I sat there, my hands gripping the wooden bench in front of me, my knuckles white. He was twisting it. Twisting Sarah's final wish, her final sacrifice, into a story of my own monstrous greed. He was painting me as the killer and Leo, the serial predator, as a grieving son-in-law. It was the most brilliant, disgusting lie I had ever heard. The defense attorney, Harrison, sat down looking pleased with himself. He had painted a perfect picture of me as a heartless, controlling monster. He had given the jury a reason for his client's actions. He had turned a murder plot into a misguided quest for justice. Then the district attorney, Ms. Reyes, stood up. The prosecution calls Nurse Grace Donovan to the stand. Grace walked to the stand. She was in her crisp white uniform, her face calm, her hands steady. She looked professional. She swore the oath, her voice clear and strong. Nurse Donovan, Ms. Reyes began. How did you know the late Sarah Crawford? Grace looked at me just for a second and offered a small, supportive smile. I was Mrs. Crawford's primary palliative care nurse during her final weeks at St. Jude's. And in that time, did you get to know her? Yes, Grace said. She was remarkable, clear-headed, brave, and very, very worried. Worried about what? About her husband, Grace said, gesturing to me. And about her son-in-law, David Vance, or Leo Thorne as we now know him. Harrison jumped up. Objection. The witness is speculating on the deceased's state of mind. This is foundational, Your Honor, Reyes countered. It explains the witness's actions on the night of the incident. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may continue. Grace turned to the jury. Sarah, Mrs. Crawford, she knew she was dying, but she was afraid. She told me, that man David, he's a hunter. I see how he looks at my husband. I see how he looks at my daughter. He's using her grief. She made me promise. She said, Henry is too trusting. His heart is too open. Please, watch over him for me. Tears welled in my eyes. I had never known this. And did you nurse Donovan? Reyes asked. I did, Grace said. I kept an eye on Mr. Vance when he visited. I saw him meeting Dr. Anderson in the cafeteria laughing when he was supposed to be in mourning. I knew Dr. Anderson had financial problems. So when Emily Vance was admitted to my ICU 2 weeks ago, I was immediately suspicious. Why? Because, Grace said, her voice dropping, she walked in. She wasn't comatose. She wasn't in a car accident. She walked into the ER, complaining of a mild headache, and was immediately transferred to my ICU and placed in a medically induced evaluation by Dr. Anderson, who ordered no visitors except immediate family. The courtroom was silent. So what did you do? I trusted Sarah's instinct, Grace said simply. I used my cell phone. I placed it in the room's ventilation grate and set it to record audio. I believed a crime was being planned, and I was right. And that recording, Reyes said, is the one we all heard yesterday. The one where the defendants plan to defraud Mr. Crawford, have him declared incompetent, and help him along. Yes, Grace said. That is the recording I made. Harrison Leo's lawyer stood up for the cross-examination. He was practically sneering. Nurse Donovan, are you telling this court that you, a medical professional, illegally recorded a private conversation in a patient's room? Grace did not flinch. She looked directly at the jury, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice full of a quiet, powerful dignity. I recorded 2 men and 1 woman plotting to defraud, institutionalize, and ultimately murder a grieving 70-year-old man. I recorded it because I made a promise to a dying woman. You can call it whatever legal term you want. I call it saving a life. Harrison stared at her, his smug smile gone. He had no answer. No further questions, he muttered and sat down. Then Ms. Reyes called her next witness. The prosecution calls Emily Crawford Vance to the stand. A door opened at the side of the courtroom, and my daughter walked in, flanked by 2 guards. She was no longer in a hospital gown, but in a simple, ill-fitting gray suit. She looked impossibly small and frail. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't look at Leo Thorne. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor as she walked to the witness box and took the oath. Her hand trembled on the Bible. Please state your name for the record, the DA said. Emily Crawford Vance. She whispered, her voice barely audible. Ms. Vance. Reyes began, her voice gentle. I know this is difficult. Can you please tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant, Mr. Thorne? Emily took a shaky breath. He was my husband. His name was David Vance. He came into my life about 6 months after my mother died. She described her grief. She painted a picture of the endless gray fog she lived in after Sarah's death. The loneliness. The feeling that her life had lost its anchor. And then David appeared, she said, her voice cracking. He was so kind. He listened. He understood my pain. He was the only person who seemed to understand how much I was hurting. And did he help you with that pain? Reyes asked. Emily nodded, the tears starting to fall. He said he was worried about my father. About me. He said he wanted to help us get our affairs in order. He started looking through my mother's old papers, or at least that's what he told me he was doing. She paused and her hands clenched in her lap, and that's when he found the letter. The one from the clinic in Germany. The courtroom was silent. This was the moment. He explained it to me. She continued, the words tumbling out now. He showed me the 80% chance. He showed me the price tag. And then he showed me my father's signature, writing no. He told me my father had let her die. And you believed him. I didn't want to, she sobbed. But he had proof. This I did not know, my heart hammered. He went back into my father's study. He found more things. He showed me insurance forms that looked like my father had canceled my mother's best treatment plan 6 months before she died. He showed me a will, a different will, one that cut me out almost entirely. He said, "Your father is a monster, Emily. He's been planning this. He let her die, and now he's planning to cut you out." I looked at Foster, my blood running cold. Forged. All of it. Leo had spent years preparing this. He had forged an entire narrative of my greed. I broke, Emily confessed to the jury, her voice a raw whisper of shame. He found me when I was at my lowest. He fed me lies until I was so full of hate. I couldn't see anything else. I believed him. I believed my father. I believed you. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. I believed you were a monster. And was it this belief that led you to agree to the plan at the hospital? Reyes asked gently. Emily nodded, her face crumbling. David, Leo, he said it was the only way. He said my father was senile and grieving, but also a sociopath. He said we had to get control to protect what was left of Mom's legacy. He said we had to stage an accident, to get him to sign the POA. He said Dr. Anderson owed him a favor and would help. He said it was justice. And you, Ms. Vance, what was your role? Emily closed her eyes, the tears streaming. I was the bait. I was the patient. I agreed. I agreed to fake my own coma. I sat in that bed, and I hated him. She pointed at me. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel the pain I felt. I wanted him to lose everything, just like I thought he had made me lose everything. She broke down completely, her sobs echoing in the courtroom. I helped him. I was so stupid. I was so blind. He used me. He used my love for my mother to destroy my father. She turned to me, her face a mask of utter despair and regret. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Harrison Leo's lawyer didn't even try to cross-examine her. He knew. You can't cross-examine that kind of raw, devastating truth. The jury had seen it all. The manipulation, the pain, the regret. And they had seen the monster sitting at the defense table, the one who had orchestrated it all. When the bailiff called my name, the courtroom went utterly silent. I stood up. I could feel every eye on me. The whispers followed me as I walked. That's him, the billionaire. He looks so normal. I walked past Leo Thorne. He was in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive charm gone replaced by a sullen, hollow-eyed hatred. He stared at me, and if looks could kill, I would have died right there. I didn't look at him. I looked at Emily. She was sitting in the gallery, no longer in custody, her face pale. She met my gaze, and her eyes were filled with a shame so profound it was a physical thing. I gave a small nod just once, and then I turned away. I took the oath. My hand, the one that had held Sarah's as she passed, was rock steady on the Bible. I sat down. Miss Reyes, the DA, was direct. Mr. Crawford, can you please state your full name and occupation? Henry Crawford. I am a retired aerospace engineer and the primary patent holder for H Composite. Mr. Crawford, she said, can you please explain to the jury why you, a man of substantial means, chose to live so humbly? Why keep this a secret, even from your own daughter? I looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people staring at me as if I were an alien. My wife Sarah and I began, my voice quiet but carrying in the silence. We weren't born rich. We built everything from nothing, and in that time we saw what sudden, unearned wealth did to people. We saw it destroy our friends' children. We saw it breed entitlement, a weakness, a belief that they were owed something. We didn't want that for Emily. We wanted her to be normal. We wanted her to learn the value of work. We wanted her to find her own path, to build her own life, to be proud of her own accomplishments, not just to be the daughter of a rich man. The money wasn't an identity. It was a safety net, a responsibility. We lived in our house because it was our home, the one we raised our daughter in, the one my wife died in. We lived simply because we were happy. Miss Reyes nodded. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. No further questions. Then Harrison stood up, Leo's lawyer. He smiled a slick, polished $1,000 smile. He was a shark, and he could smell blood. Mr. Crawford, he began. A very touching story. A real testament to simplicity. But let's be clear, shall we? You're not just well off. You are, by conservative estimates, a billionaire. Correct. My finances are complex, I said. A yes or no will suffice, sir, Harrison snapped. Are you worth, as the prosecution alleges, over $100 million? Yes, the jury murmured. And you, a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Harrison continued. Live in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in the suburbs. Yes. And you drive, correct me if I'm wrong, a 15-year-old Volvo. It's a very reliable car, I said. I'm sure it is, Harrison sneered. And you, a man who could buy this entire city block. You let your wife Sarah die in a public hospital when you could have afforded a private medical army. Objection, Foster called out. Argumentative. Sustained. Watch yourself, Mr. Harrison, the judge warned. Harrison just smiled. The damage was done. He turned back to me. And now, Mr. Crawford, this man of simple tastes. You expect this jury, these 12 honest, hard-working people, to believe this fantastic story, that you are the victim. His voice rose. Or isn't it true, Mr. Crawford, that you are a manipulator, a man so controlling, so obsessed with your money and your secrets, that you lied to your own daughter? Her entire life, that you lied to her about her mother's death. He stepped closer. Isn't it true that you denied your wife life-saving treatment to save $5 million, a sum that to you is nothing more than a rounding error? Objection. I'll allow it, the judge said. He's questioning the witness's motive. You may answer, Mr. Crawford. The courtroom was silent. This was the moment. I knew it. He knew it. I paused. I didn't look at Harrison. I turned and looked directly at the jury, at each one of them, one by one. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady, ringing in the silence. I do expect you to believe it. I expect you to believe, I continued, that I live in that house because my wife and I bought it with our first real paycheck, and it is my home, the place my child grew up, The place my wife took her last breath. It is sacred to me. I expect you to believe that I drive that car because it is safe and it works. I do not need a flashy, expensive machine to prove my worth to anyone. My mind and the patents that came from it, they do that for me. And yes, I expect you to believe that I respected my wife's final agonizing dying wish, to die in peace in her home, not in a sterile lab in Germany. A choice that she made, a choice I honored, because I loved her more than my own life. I finally turned and looked at Leo Thorne. His face was pale. "Mr. Harrison, you are right about one thing," I said, my voice rising. "I do have that much money, and you want to know why? Because I know, and my wife knew, that money does not define your value. It is a tool. It is a responsibility. It is not an identity." I pointed at Leo. "But clearly," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, hard rage, "the defendant does not. He believes money is all that matters. He believes it is worth lying for. He believes it is worth manipulating a grieving daughter for. He believes, as you all heard on that tape, that it is worth killing for. And that is the only reason why I am sitting here, and why he is sitting there." The courtroom was completely, utterly silent. Harrison stared at me, his smug smile gone, his mouth slightly open. He had no more questions. The jury was out for 2 days. They were the longest 2 days of my life. I sat in my quiet, empty house, the silence heavier than ever. I'd look at the phone wondering if Ms. Foster had news. I'd walk into Emily's old room untouched since she went to college and just stand there. What do you feel when your only child has conspired to destroy you? Emily, I was told, was in a secure holding cell awaiting the verdict. Leo Thorne and Dr. Anderson were in federal custody. On the third morning, the call came. "Henry, they have a verdict. It's time." The courtroom was a circus. It was standing room only. The press, the curious, the families of Leo's other victims. The air was so thick with anticipation, it felt hard to breathe. I sat in the front row directly behind Ms. Foster. They brought them in. Dr. Anderson looked like a ghost. He was shuffling, his face gray and slick with sweat. Leo Thorne. He was different. He was in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive charm gone, but he still had that arrogant smirk, as if this was all a very tedious game he was being forced to play. Then they brought in Emily. She was cuffed at the wrists, wearing a simple gray suit her lawyer had provided. She looked impossible. Rows of people turned to stare. He looked at me just once, and his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He didn't say a word. He just stared. And I knew in that moment that this was not a man who felt remorse. This was a man who was only angry he had been caught. The judge was swift. "Dr. Alistair Anderson," he said, his voice booming in the silence, "for your gross violation of your medical oath, your conspiracy to commit fraud, and your role in this heinous plot, this court sentences you to 20 years in state prison." Anderson slumped, a broken man. The judge turned to Leo. "Mr. Thorne, you are a predator of the highest order. You prey on the grieving and the vulnerable. You use love as a weapon and trust as a tool for murder. For the murders of Clara Hayes and Maya Chen, this court sentences you to 2 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. You will die behind bars." Leo's smirk never wavered. He just nodded once, as if the judge had just told him the weather. Then the judge turned to Emily. My heart stopped. "Ms. Crawford Vance," the judge said, his voice softening just a fraction, but still full of steel. "What you did was monstrous. You conspired against your own father. You dishonored the memory of your mother. Your actions were selfish, and in their intent deeply cruel." Emily was weeping silently, her whole body shaking. "However," the judge continued, "this court also recognizes that you too were a victim. a victim of a profound and systematic psychological manipulation. And when the time came, you chose to tell the truth at great personal cost. He looked at her. For the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, this court sentences you to 5 years, suspended. You will serve 5 years of probation, 2,000 hours of community service, and mandatory psychological counseling. She was free. Emily collapsed forward, sobbing in relief, her head on the table. I felt nothing, just empty. It was over. The monsters were caged. They led Dr. Anderson out. They led Leo Thorne out. As he passed me, he paused. He looked at me, and that terrible, charming smile returned. You're a richer man than I thought, Henry, he whispered so only I could hear. But you're still all alone. The guards pushed him forward. I stood up. I walked across the aisle to the defense table where Emily was still crying, being uncuffed. She looked up at me, her face a ruin. Dad, she whispered. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to the daughter who tried to destroy you? What do you say to the woman who just saved your life? A police officer gently touched her arm. Miss Crawford Vance, you're free to go. Emily stood, but she didn't move. She just stared at me, her eyes pleading. Dad, I don't have anywhere to go. I looked at my daughter, the child I had raised, the woman who had plotted against me, the victim who had in the end chosen the truth. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 2 years. Let's go home, Emily, I said. Let's just go home. We drove home from the courthouse in my old Volvo. The silence was deafening, heavier and more suffocating than any argument could ever be. We were 2 strangers bound by blood and betrayal, sitting in a metal box. We walked into the quiet house, the house she had tried to help steal, the house her mother had loved. It felt contaminated. Emily stood in the middle of the living room, twisting her hands. She looked lost, a ghost in her own childhood home. Dad, she finally whispered, her voice so small it barely made a sound. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I just looked at her, at my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Leo, she stammered. He made me take out credit cards. In my name. For us, for the plan. He said it was to build our new life. He said it was just moving money around. I didn't understand. She was shaking, her whole body trembling. Dad, I'm in so much trouble. I owe over $200,000. She collapsed onto the sofa, the one Sarah and I had picked out together 30 years ago, and she just broke. She put her head in her hands and sobbed, a deep, agonizing, hopeless sound. She was free from him, but he had still left her in chains. I didn't say anything. I just watched her for a moment. The woman who had conspired against me now, completely ruined. I turned and walked to my study. I went to the old bookshelf, pulled out the copy of Moby Dick, and opened the safe. I reached inside, past the hard drive with Sarah's video, past the H-composite patent documents. I pulled out a different folder, a slim, leather-bound one. I walked back into the living room. Emily was still crying, her shoulders shaking. I sat down in my old armchair across from her. I opened the folder. It contained a checkbook from a bank she had never heard of, a corporate account. I took out my pen, the same red pen I had used to write no on that fateful letter. I wrote a date. I wrote her name. I wrote an amount. I signed it with a steady hand. I tore the check out. The sound was loud in the quiet weeping room. I leaned forward and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. She looked up, her face streaked with tears and shame. She looked at the check. Her eyes widened. She stared at it, her brain unable to process the numbers. It wasn't for 200,000. It was for far more. What? What is this? She whispered. I can't. This is... It's your salary, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. It's your back pay. We drove home from the courthouse in my old Volvo. The silence was deafening, heavier, and more suffocating than any argument could ever be. We were two strangers bound by blood and betrayal sitting in a rattling metal box. We walked into the quiet house. The house she had tried to help steal. The house her mother had loved. It felt contaminated. Emily stood in the middle of the living room, twisting her hands. She looked lost, a ghost in her own childhood home. Dad, she finally whispered, her voice so small it barely made a sound. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I just looked at her, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Leo, she stammered. He made me take out credit cards. In my name. For us, for the plan. He said it was to build our new life. He said it was just moving money around. I didn't understand. She was shaking, her whole body trembling. Dad, I'm ruined. I owe over $200,000. She collapsed onto the sofa, the one Sarah and I had picked out together so many years ago, and she just broke. She put her head in her hands and sobbed a deep, agonizing, hopeless sound. She was free from him, but he had still left her in chains. I didn't say anything. I just watched her for a long, cold moment. The woman who had conspired against me, now completely ruined. I turned and walked to my study. I went to the old bookshelf, pulled out the copy of Moby Dick, and opened the safe. I reached inside, past the hard drive with Sarah's video, past the H-composite patent documents. I pulled out a different folder, a slim, leather-bound one. I walked back into the living room. Emily was still crying, her shoulders shaking. I sat down in my old armchair across from her. I opened the folder. It contained a checkbook. A checkbook from a bank she had never heard of. A corporate account. I took out my pen, the same red pen I had used to write no on that fateful letter. I wrote the date. I wrote her name, Emily Crawford, not Vance. I wrote an amount. I signed it with a steady hand. I tore the check out. The sound was loud in the quiet weeping room. I leaned forward and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. She looked up, her face streaked with tears and shame. She looked at the check. Her eyes widened. She stared at it, her brain unable to process the numbers. It wasn't for 200,000. It was for far more. What is this? She whispered. Dad, I can't. It's your salary, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. It's your back pay. She looked at me, utterly confused. Salary, what? What are you talking about? I worked at a non-profit. I made $30,000 a year. I know, I said. You worked at the Sarah Crawford Foundation for Community Arts. Your mother set it up. She founded it secretly 5 years ago. Emily was lost. Mom founded it. But why? She never said. Because she knew you, I said softly, the coldness in my voice finally breaking. She knew your heart, Emily. But she also saw him. She saw Leo Thorne, or David as he called himself. She saw him before he became a part of your life. She knew he was a hunter. She knew he would target you. She knew, and she set up a trust, a private trust separate from mine, just for you. I explained the conditions Sarah had laid out. She put a condition on it, a 5-year condition. You couldn't just get the money. You had to earn it. You had to work for 5 years at that specific nonprofit. The one she created for you. She wanted you to build your own worth, Emily. She wanted you to be independent, to have your own money separate from me, and separate from any man who might try to control you. Emily was staring at the check, her mind racing, connecting the dots. So, the job I've had, the small salary I got every month, the job David told me was a waste of my time. That wasn't a salary, Emily, I said. That was your mother's trust fund paid out to you in installments. The very job he despised was the one thing saving you. The money you've been earning for the last 5 years. It wasn't just enough to live on. It was enough to pay off this exact debt. You saved yourself, Emily. Your mother, she made sure you would. She looked at the check. She looked at the photo of Sarah on the mantel. She finally understood. She realized that both of her parents, in their own separate, secret ways, had been protecting her. One by keeping a promise that made him a monster in her eyes, and the other by building a financial lifeboat from beyond the grave. She didn't sob this time. The tears were quiet, filled with a profound, aching understanding. She stood up slowly, her legs still trembling. I want to go see her, she whispered, her voice raw. Dad, can we go visit Mom's grave? The cemetery was quiet. The bright, clear sky felt like a mockery after the darkness of the trial. We stood in front of Sarah's grave, a simple granite headstone that just said, Sarah Crawford, beloved wife and mother. Emily was the first to break the silence. She was holding a small bouquet of white peonies, her knuckles white. I always thought she was allergic, Emily whispered, her voice raw. Leo, he told me she hated them. He said they made her sick. I never brought her flowers because I was afraid of hurting her. She loved them, I said, my own voice thick. They were her favorites. He lied about that too. He lied about everything. Emily sank to her knees, placing the peonies gently on the grass. He lied, she repeated, and I helped him. I stood in court and told them. I told them what he taught me to say. I helped him try to destroy you. How can you even stand here next to me? I looked at my daughter, this stranger who shared my wife's eyes. Because I'm grieving too, Emily. And not just for her. I'm grieving for the last 2 years. I'm grieving for the daughter I thought I knew, and I'm grieving for the fact that I'm the one who gave him the weapon. She looked up, confused. What? My promise, I said, the word tasting like ash. My promise to your mother. I kept it so fiercely. I was so determined to protect you from the truth of her choice that I built a wall around myself, a wall of secrets, and he used those secrets against us. He turned my promise into a prison. I failed her, Emily. I failed you. No, she whispered, standing up. You didn't fail. You were honoring her. You were doing what you thought was right. I'm the one who was weak. I was so angry, so hurt. I wanted to believe you were a monster, because it was easier than just missing her. We were both victims, Emily, I said, finally turning to look her in the eye. We were victims of him, and we were victims of our own family secrets. I took a deep breath. The air was cold, but I felt a warmth spreading through me, a final burning clarity. I'm done with secrets, I said. Emily looked at me. What do you mean? I'm tired, Emily. I'm 70 years old, and I am so tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending to be the humble engineer. I'm tired of living in a prison built from my own money. I'm done being the billionaire ghost. It stops. Today. I called Ms. Foster this morning, I said. I gave her new instructions. I told her to begin the process of giving it all away. Emily's eyes widened in shock. Giving it all away? Dad, what are you talking about? All of it. Not all of it, I said. Half. Half? She whispered. Dad, half is... That's hundreds of millions of dollars. What are you... Half of it is yours. Emily, I said, cutting her off. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. No, I can't. I won't. I don't deserve it. Not after what I did. I'm an accomplice. Dad, no. It's not about what you deserve, I said, my voice firm. It's about what is right. It's your mother's money as much as it was mine. It's your birthright. The birthright I tried to hide from you. And in doing so, I made you vulnerable to a man like Leo. This is my way of fixing my mistake. It's yours. No conditions, no strings, no secret foundations. I trust you with it. Emily was speechless, her mind clearly reeling, unable to process the scale of it. But what about the other half? She finally managed to ask. What are you going to do? The other half, I said, looking back at Sarah's name on the headstone, is for her. I'm establishing the Sarah Crawford Foundation for Patient Dignity. Emily looked confused. For patient dignity? For pancreatic cancer research, yes, I clarified. But more than that, it's for palliative care, for end-of-life advocacy, to support patients who want to make their own choices, to give them the legal and financial power to choose peace, to choose to die at home, to make the very choice your mother made, the choice I was almost destroyed for honoring. I turned back to my daughter. Your mother spent the last 2 years of her life in and out of hospitals, and she saw so many people who didn't have her choices, people who fought on because their families weren't ready to let go, people who died in sterile rooms alone. She didn't want that for anyone, I said. This is what she would have done with the money. I wish I had been brave enough to do it while she was still here to see it. Emily was quiet for a long time, the wind rustling the peonies at her feet. She looked at the grave, then at me. That's beautiful, Dad, she whispered. It's a lot of work, I said, a small tired smile touching my lips. A multi-billion-dollar foundation starting from scratch. It's a monster of a project. I paused. I'm going to need a director of operations, someone I can trust, someone who knows what it feels like to be on the other side, someone who understands what this is really about. Emily looked at me, her eyes so much like her mother's, slowly filling with a new light. Not just understanding, but purpose. Dad, she said, her voice trembling, I don't know anything about running a foundation. Neither do I admitted. But I think your mother knew we'd figure it out. Together. I'm going to run the foundation, Emily, I told her, my voice feeling stronger than it had in years. It's what your mother would have wanted. She would have used this money to help people, not to hide it. I looked at the simple granite stone. Sarah Crawford, beloved wife and mother. I'm going to honor her, but I can't do it alone. Emily looked up at me, her face still streaked with tears and confusion. What do you mean, Dad? I'm 70 years old, I said. I'm an engineer. I know how to build things, but I don't know how to run something this big. A multi-billion-dollar foundation. It needs a director. An executive director. Emily just stared at me, not understanding where this was going. I need someone I can trust, Emily. Someone who knows what it feels like to be on the other side. Someone who understands, intimately, how money can be used as a weapon and how it can be used to heal. She finally understood. Her eyes widened and she took a step back, shaking her head. Dad, no, I can't. Look at me. I'm, I'm a convicted felon. I, I don't know anything about running a foundation. I helped. I helped him. I reached out, and for the first time I took her hand. It was cold, but she didn't pull away. You know more than you think, I told her. You know what it feels like to be manipulated. You know what it feels like to be in pain. And you know what it feels like to find the truth. You've learned the hardest lesson of all, Emily. You learned that people matter more than money. You're the only person in the world I trust to run this. She looked at me, her mother's eyes searching mine, and for the first time I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor. Years passed. 5 to be exact. I stood on a bright, sunny stage, the wind catching the microphone. I'm 75 now. My old Volvo is long gone. I mostly walk. Next to me stood Emily. She was radiant. She was the woman her mother always knew she could be. We weren't in a cemetery. We were in front of a new, shining glass building. I am honored, I said, my voice carrying over the crowd, to dedicate the Sarah Crawford Cancer Hospital, a place not just for treatment, but for choice. I looked at Emily. She smiled at me, a real, genuine smile. We were no longer the secret billionaires, the reclusive engineer, the grieving daughter. We were philanthropists. Our story, once a dark secret, had become a public mission. Emily, as the executive director of the foundation, had rebuilt her life. She had rebuilt it not with my money, but with the purpose her mother had left her. She met a good man, a kind man, one of the doctors from this very hospital. They have a daughter, a little girl with Sarah's eyes. As we held the giant scissors together to cut the blue ribbon, a reporter called out, "Mr. Crawford, after everything, how does it feel?" I paused, looked at my daughter, and then at the crowd. For 40 years, I said, I had a fortune. But for the last 5, I've been truly rich. We cut the ribbon. Emily had found her life, and I had found mine. We had been saved not by the 9 figures in a Swiss bank account, but by the truth. This story shows how greed and manipulation can twist family bonds, turning love into a vulnerability to be exploited. It teaches us that true strength isn't measured by the wealth you hide, but by the courage to face a devastating truth, even when it costs you everything. It's a reminder that true healing and freedom only begin when the most painful secrets are brought into the light, and that it is never too late to reclaim your life by choosing honesty over silence. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.